I very much appreciate. I suppose my remarks are probably more pertinently directed to TikTok and Meta, because I do take the point that X is more older content. So I suppose I come from a place where my view of social media is that by design, it pushes a operant conditioning in behaviour modification. It uses, that circular of trigger, action, variable reward, investment. It involves deliberate manipulation and capture, behaviour modification, and captures attention, and attention is actually what is monetised, as being that which advertisers can have access to, and that's the basis of the business model here, of an advertising-based one. I have read the advisory of the US Surgeon General entitled "Social Media and Youth Mental Health," and I'm concerned about young people and their access to smartphones, full stop, which I personally think should be banned. But brain development has changed. Mental health has been affected by the amount of time that is spent on social media, as well as the content that is thereon. And in that, I also have the report from Commission Amon that looks at their video platform services and how online harms and their evidence review. The Commission Amana, whom I met with last week, would urge a whole of society response to this, and I completely agree with that. This isn't all at your door by any means. It's us as policymakers and legislators to take action. Yes, you as the technology companies, parents and caregivers need to also, and children themselves and adolescents need to set their own boundaries, as parents need to also. So I'm not abdicating any responsibility for anybody else. But I suppose one of my questions would be, do you acknowledge that harm, that impact on that behavioural modification and developmental modification that has occurred as a consequence of social media and the design of social media? I suppose, mental health illness, if we look at some of the statistics of mental health illness among college students, with the advent of the smartphone since 2010 in the United States, this is, anxiety has increased by 134%, depression has increased by 106%, ADHD is up by 72%, bipolar up by 57%, anorexia is up 100%, substance abuse addiction up 33%. And I have a colleague, Roderick Cowan, who speaks a lot of cognitive resilience is gone behind in the design of social media, and that we need cognitive security for young people in its design. And consequently, we need transparent risk assessments that come from this basis of mental health focused, that there needs to be impact assessments published. And I don't believe that there's been transparency around that. The design and development of decisions within social media companies need to prioritise safety and health, including children's privacy, their age verification. I note that WhatsApp reduced their age recently and wouldn't approve of that. The reporting of problem content, for all of you, particularly X, is abominable in the response to that. But in my view, social media needs to come with a mental health warning, that there needs to be, that if a child is on, or any individual of any age, but particularly young people, if they're on the social media platform, a warning needs to come up to say, you've now been on this 15 minutes. You need to go and take a break from this. There needs to be a health warning that comes up that limits the timings of people, but that is in contrast to the actual business model, which is about attention holding. So I suppose I'd like to know, what's your position? Do you acknowledge the harms? And about cognitive resilience and cognitive security, what steps are you taking in that regard? Because we can talk about all the harmful content, and that is all agreed, but that's a distance from the fact that your design is something that has brought about behaviour modification.
Okay, so Chloe, you want to come in? Okay. Then anyone else who just want to indicate if they want to reply?
Thank you for your question, Senator. I think we totally appreciate concerns around screen time, addiction, well-being of our younger users, those aged 13 and upwards on TikTok. And as with anything in life, I think we need to find that balance. We believe that digital experiences should bring joy, should be a positive experience. It's a great opportunity for young people to learn, to socialize, to discover new things, to develop new digital skills. And having a positive relationship with apps and platforms and the online world isn't just simply about sort of measuring time. It's about the quality of the time spent and what they're doing. So if they're learning things, if they're socializing, there's a whole different types of experience that young people
I'm sorry,
can have.
but this isn't what I'm asking. I'm asking about the fact that a young person spending a huge amount of time on social media is interrupting their development of social skills with other human beings, not learning things on social media. I agree that there is positive possibilities here, but that's not what I'm getting at.
Absolutely, and there's currently no sort of agreed amongst experts, a collective kind of agreement on the amount of time that's good. But we have been working with external experts on this. We've worked with the Boston Children's Wellness Lab to develop a screen time limit. So all under 18s on TikTok have a 60-minute default screen time limit. And once they reach the 60 minutes, they have to input a passcode if they want to keep watching. And the reason we do that is based, as I said, on working in consultation with experts about how young people approach these kind of things and being intentional about the amount of time they spent. So giving them those nudges, those pieces of information like you've spent 60 minutes now, actually helps them develop critical thinking and gives them a reminder. We also surface other take a break reminders. We don't send push notifications, for example, to ages 13 to 15 after 9 p.m. in the evening, and for those 16 to 17-year-olds after 10 p.m. And I think research we've done, for example, with Internet Matters, an NGO, which we did work with teens and parents in Ireland, UK, France, Italy, and Germany. And we asked young people and parents about what works for them in this sort of scenario. And they told us they wanted more data about their usage. So we introduced a dashboard, which gives them every week a weekly notification, a recap of how much time they've spent, what time of day they were spending time. And give them screen time breaks, which we've done with the screen time limit. But I think a key thing to mention here is perhaps family pairing. So we have some excellent family pairing tools that allow parents and guardians to customize their teens' experience. They can set screen time limits. You can set the time of day. It can be like weekends only, school holidays only. It's a very customizable experience. And in that scenario, the young person would need to get the passcode from their parents, so they can't simply override it. So there are things that parents can do as well to help have those conversations about what a healthy amount of time is, and that might vary depending on the child and depending on the time of day or what sort of day it is, a weekday or so on.
Okay.
Thank you, and thank you for the question. And I might ask David in a minute to go into how the approach we take to designing our products generally, and then some of the tools around time limits, etc. There's just two things I'd mention. The first, you mentioned risk assessments in particular. So this would be one of the requirements of the Digital Services Act. So strategic risk assessments have been submitted to the European Commission, and they've also been provided to Commission Man in our case. And a part of that is that providers are required to assess the risks that are maybe caused by their services across a whole range of issues. Mental health is one of the areas, protection of children is one of the areas, and then the providers are required to describe how they're mitigating those risks. And obviously the regulators will be looking at, are we assessing the risk correctly? Are we mitigating the risk correctly? They're not going to be made public immediately. They will be done on an annual basis, and I think the first ones are going to be published around October or November of this year. But just to say, the risk assessments are already provided for. They're in the digital services.
But is that in the context of, the self-harm, suicide, push, the body image, toxic body image? Is it that, or the actual functioning of social media, which is, that the scrolling in and of itself is a variable reward mechanism that changes cognitive function? Yeah,
so the Digital Services Act goes into quite a lot of detail about what risks need to be considered and what feeds into those risks, and the design of the products is one of those things. the recommender systems are one of those things that is mentioned, that is called out explicitly, repeatedly in the Digital Services Act. So that's there, it's just not public yet, and it's being considered obviously by the European Commission. The other thing I'd mention, just in relation to the whole of society approach, and again, I'm not in any way trying to absolve any responsibility on our part for doing what we need to do in this space, but that's why we're particularly proud of the funding we provided to the FUSE programme for its establishment. That is actually a global first, and I think it's something that Ireland can be very, very proud of, because it follows the UNESCO whole of education approach to online bullying, to bullying and harassment, which also includes the online element as well. But that is designed to build that resilience, build that healthy relationship that teens and the whole of school community can have with the online world, including social media. But maybe, Dave, if I ask you to say a few words around design, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's a very good question, and clearly a concern from society and from parents. I've been in the online safety space for around 20 years, well before children were a dominant factor on the internet. And there's no question that the youth demographic has grown dramatically, not just in Europe, but worldwide. And so rightly, things need to change. And I think the first thing to say is that in terms of the design of products, if you look back to where they were maybe 8 to 10 years ago, they were designed predominantly for adults. And then there's been a significant shift as that youth demographic has grown. And so I've been involved in NGOs, UNICEF, and other environments in that kind of space. And you have a spectrum of harms that has emerged with that as well, which we have to deal with. So I think there are some really important cognitive issues that need to be dealt with, and so we work really closely with experts and researchers and academics in this area, and have done for many years. I have worked with the UK Council for Internet Safety's evidence group for nearly 10 years, and so we try and take a really evidence-based approach. And also in the last 4 years, I've implemented effectively co-design workshops with children and parents to look at how they're using the technology, getting their input and participation in how we design feeds and the different functionality. And really as a result of that, in the last 2.5 years, we've implemented close to 30 different types of tools and functions based on that. And what's really interesting, when you get young people involved with that, there are some things which we would assume were going to work well, but didn't, and others that they've taken on board, for example, and really informed the way we've done it. So things like take a break, which is a fairly standard concept in terms of taking a break and being prompted to take a break after a certain amount of time, but also quiet mode, just shutting down from your followers so that you can have a rest from that overnight and so on. And even parental supervision tools, what we've done is worked with the UNCRC and the IDPC's Children's Fundamentals to implement a best interest of the child framework, which puts the participation of young people and the rights of young people into the design of those products. So, for example, if you implement a parental supervision tool on Quest or on Instagram, both the child and the parent opt into that, and there's a sort of teachable moment there where they can talk about that. So it's features and functions like that. And I think the final example I would give is last week we announced an on-device nudity filter, which will effectively put an interstitial over every single nude image and will warn anybody sending an image that they need to think about what they're sending. That's a really big move for us globally. We think it'll deal with a lot of issues in schools around unsolicited images. And it also complements our strategy around what we call Stop NCII, which is women's safety, and Take It Down, which we're working with NICMEC on, which actually allows us to hash images and get them sent to NICMEC or to a women's safety org to try and have that content taken down. And the technology we use is multi-platform. So we've just open sourced that to other platforms so that that content can get taken down across multiple platforms. So I think we as a business are evolving very, very quickly. I think your concerns are justified, and we rely very heavily in areas like suicide and self-harm, for example. We have an expert committee of more than 27 experts in that area to guide us on just getting those controls right. And in January, as a result of their advice, we no longer actually show any suicide, self-harm or eating disorder content really in any form through recommender systems, reels and stories, and have made a dramatic move in that area to cut that back with the guidance of experts to make sure that youngsters are not cognitively affected, but also that they can signpost to partners, many partners and experts, to get the assistance they need. So I think the nature of social media has changed in the last 10 years, and I feel that we're responding to that, and we'll always need to do more because it's a fast-moving space. But thank you for the question.